Have you ever felt like no matter how much you achieve, it's never enough? Like you constantly doubt yourself, struggle with setting boundaries, or feel guilty for putting yourself first? If this sounds familiar, you might have been raised by narcissistic parents, and the effects can last long into adulthood. Narcissistic parents prioritize their own needs, manipulate their children for validation, and create an environment where love feels conditional. And growing up in this kind of environment can deeply impact your self-worth, your relationships, and your emotional well-being. In today's video, we'll explore 10 signs that you were raised by narcissistic parents, the long-term effects this may have had on you, and most importantly, how you can begin to heal. One of the most common effects of being raised by narcissistic parents is chronic self-doubt and low self-esteem. You might feel like no matter how much you accomplish, it's never truly good enough. You may rely heavily on external validation, seeking approval from others because you were conditioned to believe that your worth is tied to your achievements. Your parents may have constantly criticized or dismissed your successes, making you feel like you had to work harder just to earn love and recognition. As a result, even as an adult, you might struggle to trust your own abilities and second-guess your decisions. This can make everyday tasks feel overwhelming, as if you're constantly waiting for someone to tell you that you're doing it wrong or not enough. Did you grow up feeling like mistakes were unacceptable? Narcissistic parents often set unrealistic standards, making their children feel like failure is catastrophic. This leads to intense perfectionism, anxiety, and avoidance behaviors. You might find yourself procrastinating out of fear that your work won't be good enough, or avoiding risks because failure feels too overwhelming. Even when no one is judging you, your inner critic is relentless because it was trained by years of impossible expectations. This perfectionism can also spill over into relationships where you may feel like you have to be perfect in order to be loved. If something goes wrong, you might blame yourself, thinking, if only I had been better, this wouldn't have happened. But the truth is, no one is perfect, and real love and self-worth don't depend on being flawless. Another major sign of being raised by narcissistic parents is difficulty setting boundaries. Growing up, you were likely taught that your needs and feelings didn't matter as much as your parents' demands. Saying no might feel incredibly uncomfortable, and you might overextend yourself just to keep the peace. As a result, you might attract people who take advantage of your kindness, whether in friendships, romantic relationships, or at work. Learning to set boundaries and say no without guilt is one of the key steps in breaking free from these patterns. Many people raised by narcissistic parents find that they struggle with guilt after setting even the simplest boundaries. They feel like they are being selfish, mean, or ungrateful. But setting boundaries is not about pushing people away. It's about protecting your well-being and making sure your relationships are based on mutual respect. Were you constantly walking on eggshells around your parents? If so, you might have developed hypervigilance, always scanning the room, picking up on the smallest changes in tone or body language, and adjusting your behavior to prevent conflict. This can lead to chronic people-pleasing, where your own needs take a back seat to keeping others happy. You might suppress your true feelings, avoid confrontation at all costs, and struggle with asserting yourself. Over time, this can make relationships exhausting because you're always monitoring others, trying to predict their reactions, and doing everything you can to avoid upsetting them. But real relationships should allow you to relax, express yourself honestly, and feel safe being who you truly are. Growing up with narcissistic parents often means that your emotions were invalidated, dismissed, or even mocked. If you ever expressed sadness, frustration, or disappointment, you may have been told you were being too sensitive or dramatic. As a result, you may have learned to disconnect from your own emotions. You might struggle with emotional regulation, suppressing anger or sadness because it feels unsafe to express how you really feel. Over time, this can lead to emotional numbness, where you find it difficult to know what you truly feel or need. Healing from this means reconnecting with your emotions and learning that your feelings are valid, no matter what anyone else has told you in the past. Narcissistic parents are masters of guilt-tripping and gaslighting. They may have manipulated you into believing that your needs were selfish or that prioritizing yourself was wrong. This can lead to deep-rooted guilt and shame, making it difficult for you to advocate for yourself even when it's necessary. If you've ever felt guilty for setting boundaries, distancing yourself from toxic people, or prioritizing your mental health, it's likely a direct result of this conditioning. You may also struggle with an inner voice that constantly criticizes you, making you feel ashamed for things that aren't even your fault. Recognizing that this voice was programmed into you by an unhealthy dynamic is the first step toward silencing it. When you grow up with parents who constantly invalidate your choices and identity, you may struggle with a fragile sense of self. You might feel like you don't truly know who you are outside of your parents' expectations. As a result, you may second-guess your decisions, overanalyze every choice, and feel like you wear different masks depending on who you're around. You may even fear that if people saw the real you, they wouldn't accept you, because that's the message your parents instilled in you. The chronic stress of growing up in a narcissistic household can lead to long-term mental health struggles such as anxiety, depression, and even CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. You may experience hypervigilance, constantly on edge, waiting for the next conflict, emotional flashbacks, sudden waves of shame, fear, or guilt that seem to come out of nowhere, avoidance behaviors, pushing people away or isolating yourself to feel safe. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward healing. One of the most painful effects of being raised by narcissistic parents is that toxic relationships feel familiar. You might unconsciously be drawn to emotionally unavailable or controlling partners because that's the dynamic you grew up with. You may tolerate poor treatment, believing that love has to be earned. But healthy relationships don't work this way. Love should be freely given, not something you have to constantly prove yourself worthy of. Lastly, many children of narcissistic parents grow up feeling deeply misunderstood and emotionally isolated. You might struggle to trust others, feel uncomfortable opening up, or withdraw from relationships out of fear of being hurt. Healing from narcissistic abuse starts with recognizing that you are not alone. There are people who understand what you've been through, and recovery is possible. If you relate to these signs, know this: you are not broken. You were conditioned to believe things about yourself that are simply not true. Healing starts with therapy or support groups, learning to rewire your beliefs and build healthy coping mechanisms. Inner child work, validating the emotions that were dismissed in your childhood. Setting boundaries, protecting your mental and emotional space. Self-validation, learning to trust and accept yourself without external approval. You don't have to live in the shadow of your past. You deserve to heal. You deserve love, respect, and inner peace. Which of these signs resonated most with you? Drop a comment below and let's start the conversation. If this video helped you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more insights on mental health and healing. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. It might be the first step in their healing journey. You are not alone, and you deserve to heal.